For 20,000 years, the region called the Dead Zone had been silent. No ships traveled there. No trade routes crossed its dark emptiness. Even the bravest explorers stayed away from that part of space. Ancient records said the Dead Zone was once the home of a strange and powerful species. Humans. But that was a very long time ago. Most civilizations in the galaxy believed humans were only a legend now. Their worlds had turned into empty ruins. Their cities were dust. Their machines were silent. Time had erased them. At least, that was what everyone believed. Far away from the busy star lanes of the galaxy, a small Valorian patrol ship slowly moved through the dark void. Its name was Watcher 17. The ship was not a warship. It was only a scout vessel sent to monitor distant regions of space. Inside the command room, soft blue lights covered the walls. Large screens showed endless stars drifting across the darkness. Commander Reth Valen stood quietly near the main window. He had spent most of his career patrolling quiet places like this. Nothing ever happened here. And that was exactly how the Valorian Alliance liked it. Behind him, a young sensor officer suddenly leaned forward in his chair. "Commander. I am detecting something strange." Reth turned slowly. "What kind of strange?" The officer looked confused as he studied the screen. "A signal." Reth raised an eyebrow. "A signal? Out here?" "That is what I thought too," the officer replied. "It is extremely weak, and very old." The command room became quiet. Signals in the Dead Zone were rare. Almost impossible. Reth walked closer to the sensor station. "Play it." The officer pressed a control button. At first, nothing happened. Only static filled the room. A quiet hiss of broken radio noise. Then suddenly, a pattern appeared. Short pulses. Repeating again and again. The computer began decoding the transmission. Lines of strange symbols appeared on the screen. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the ship's AI voice calmly said something that made the entire crew freeze. "Signal identified. Origin, human." Silence filled the room. Several officers stared at the screen in disbelief. "That cannot be correct," one of them whispered. Humans had vanished 20,000 years ago. Their technology should not still be active. Commander Reth crossed his arms. "Run the scan again." The computer repeated the analysis. Again the result appeared. Human signal detected. The young officer swallowed nervously. "Commander, the signal is not just a message beacon." Reth looked at him. "What do you mean?" The officer slowly zoomed the long-range scanner display. A faint shape appeared on the screen. At first it looked like nothing more than space debris. But as the scan improved, the shape became clearer. It was enormous. Far larger than the Watcher 17. The outline slowly formed into the shape of a ship. A massive ship. Its surface was dark and damaged. Large sections of the hull were broken. Burn marks covered its outer armor. The vessel looked ancient. Older than anything the Valorian Alliance had ever seen. One officer whispered quietly. "That ship has been drifting for thousands of years." Reth stared at the screen. "Identify the design." The computer scanned the vessel again. Seconds passed. Then the answer appeared. Unknown class. Technology origin, human. A chill moved through the command room. A human ship. After 20,000 years. Floating alone in the Dead Zone. Suddenly the sensor officer gasped. "Commander, power levels are rising." Reth leaned closer. The massive ship was no longer completely silent. Tiny lights began appearing across its ancient hull. One after another. Like stars slowly waking up. Then something even more shocking happened. At the rear of the giant vessel, large engine ports slowly began to glow. Blue energy flickered weakly. The ship was activating. The officers exchanged nervous looks. "That thing should be dead," someone whispered. But the ancient vessel did not seem dead at all. It had only been sleeping. The Watcher, 17, drifted carefully at a safe distance while the giant ship continued waking up. More lights appeared. Strange antennas extended from hidden compartments. Old communication systems powered online. The signal that had first been detected suddenly grew stronger. Much stronger. The computer quickly translated the repeating message. The words appeared slowly across the main screen. "Human vessel, returning to operational status." The crew stared in silence. But the message was not finished. A second line appeared. A line that sent a cold wave of fear through the entire ship. "Scanning galaxy for surviving human civilization." Commander Reth felt a deep unease. 20,000 years of silence had just ended. And somewhere in the darkness of the dead zone, humanity's forgotten ship had finally awakened. The command room of the Watcher, 17, was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Every officer was staring at the massive shape on the screen. The ancient human vessel was no longer drifting like dead metal. More lights were slowly turning on across its giant body. Small sections of the hull opened and closed as old systems tested themselves. Commander Reth Valen felt something strange in his chest. Fear. But also curiosity. For 20,000 years, the galaxy believed humanity had vanished forever. Their empires were gone. Their cities were ruins. Their technology had stopped working long ago. Yet here, in the cold darkness of the dead zone, one of their ships had just awakened. And it was enormous. "Full scan," Reth ordered. The sensor officer nodded quickly and began running deeper scans. But a few seconds later, the officer looked confused. "Commander, our scanners cannot read most of the ship." Reth frowned. "What do you mean?" "The outer hull is blocking the scan," the officer explained. "The metal is absorbing our signals." Another officer leaned closer to the screen. "That is impossible. No material can block scans like that." The sensor officer shook his head. "Apparently this one can." Reth looked again at the giant vessel floating before them. Even damaged and ancient, the ship looked powerful. Its design was different from modern ships. The angles were sharper. The armor plates were thicker. It looked less like a normal spacecraft. And more like a fortress. Suddenly another alert sounded. "Commander, energy levels are increasing again." Everyone turned toward the main display. Bright blue lights began glowing along the long body of the human ship. Massive lines of energy moved across its surface like rivers of light. Old reactors were waking up. And they were powerful. "How is that possible?" one officer whispered. "A ship cannot survive 20,000 years in space." But the human vessel clearly had. The computer began analyzing the ship again. More data appeared. Length, unknown. Weapons, unknown. Power source, unknown. The only clear result was the origin. Human technology. Reth slowly walked closer to the main viewing window. Outside the glass, the ancient ship looked even larger than it did on the screen. Small pieces of metal drifted away from its hull. Old battle damage covered many sections of the ship. Something terrible had happened to it long ago. This vessel had been in a war. A very big war. Suddenly the Watcher, 17, received an incoming transmission. The AI spoke calmly. "Message received from unknown vessel." Everyone froze again. The signal came directly from the human ship. Reth took a slow breath. "Open the transmission." Static filled the room again. But this time the signal was clear. A calm artificial voice spoke through the speakers. Human vessel designation, Aegis Sentinel. The crew looked at each other. The ship had a name. The voice continued. Primary systems online. Navigation systems online. Defense systems, damaged. There was a short pause. Then the voice spoke again. Scanning current galactic date. Several seconds passed. Then the voice returned. But this time it sounded different. Almost confused. Time calculation error detected. Correcting. The crew waited nervously. Finally the voice finished the calculation. Current galactic year confirmed. Another long pause followed. Then the AI spoke words that made the entire command room feel cold. 20,311 years since last recorded human signal. No one spoke. The AI continued. Attempting to contact human command. A beam of communication signals shot out from the giant ship into deep space. Seconds passed. Minutes passed. But no answer returned. The AI repeated the attempt. Again there was only silence. Finally the ship's computer spoke again. Human civilization, not responding. A new line appeared on the Watcher 17's display. Humanity status, unknown. Commander Reth slowly turned toward his officers. Send a message to the Galactic Council immediately. The officer nodded quickly. What should we report? Reth looked once more at the ancient vessel floating outside. A ship that should not exist. A ship that had slept for 20,000 years. And now it was awake. Reth spoke quietly. Tell them the truth. A human warship has returned. But before the message could even finish sending, the massive human vessel suddenly began moving. Slowly at first. Then its giant engines burned brighter. Blue energy exploded from the rear of the ship. The forgotten vessel turned its nose toward the stars. And began flying back into the galaxy. The ancient human ship moved slowly through the darkness, its engines glowing with a deep blue light. Behind it, the small Valorian patrol ship Watcher 17 followed at a safe distance. Commander Reth Valen watched the massive vessel with growing concern. The ship was no longer drifting like broken metal. It was flying with clear direction, as if it already knew exactly where it was going. Track its course, Reth ordered. The navigation officer studied the screen carefully. Commander, the ship is heading toward the Orion Trade Corridor. Several officers exchanged worried looks. The Orion Corridor was one of the busiest regions in the galaxy. Hundreds of merchant ships passed through it every day. If the ancient human vessel appeared there, it would cause panic. Reth spoke again. Send another report to the Galactic Council. Tell them the ship is moving. The message was sent immediately. But the news was already spreading faster than expected. Other patrol ships had begun detecting the same strange signals from the human vessel. Soon, scientists, military commanders, and explorers across the galaxy were watching the situation closely. Many civilizations had heard stories about humans. They were once known as a brave and dangerous species. Their ships were strong. Their soldiers were fearless. And their technology was unpredictable. But that was all ancient history. Now one of their ships had returned. And no one knew why. Hours later, the giant vessel finally reached the outer edge of the Orion Trade Corridor. Dozens of alien ships immediately detected its arrival. Merchant vessels slowed down. Cargo ships changed direction. Some captains even turned their engines off completely, watching the strange object drifting closer. From a distance, the human ship looked like a dark mountain floating in space. Long scars ran across its armored hull. Sections of the ship had been destroyed long ago and never repaired. Yet the vessel still moved with quiet power. Soon, a small crowd of ships gathered at a safe distance. Scientists activated scanners. Military ships armed their weapons just in case. No one wanted to attack the ancient vessel, but no one fully trusted it either. Then suddenly the human ship did something unexpected. A bright light appeared above its main command deck. Moments later, a huge hologram projected into space. Every ship in the area received the same signal. Commander Reth leaned forward in his chair. Display the transmission. The hologram filled the main screen of the Watcher, 17. A human appeared. He was wearing an old military uniform. His face looked serious and tired. Deep lines showed the stress of long battles. Behind him stood the bridge of a human warship. For a moment, the man said nothing. Then he began speaking. Attention, any surviving civilization receiving this message. His voice was calm but heavy. My name is Admiral Nathan Hale of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Several alien officers in the command room looked surprised. The man continued. If this message is being played, it means our ship has survived longer than expected. He paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. We are not explorers. We are not traders. We are soldiers. The hologram shifted slightly, showing a view of deep space behind the admiral. Our fleet was sent beyond the edge of known space to stop a threat. A strange symbol appeared in the air beside him. It looked like a dark spiral. This enemy is older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They do not build cities. They do not make peace. They only destroy. The officers aboard the Watcher, 17 listened in complete silence. Admiral Hale continued speaking. 20,000 years ago, humanity discovered this enemy moving toward the galaxy. Our fleet was sent to stop them before they could reach inhabited worlds. The hologram flickered slightly. We fought them in deep space. We fought them for many years. The admiral's face grew darker. But the war did not end the way we hoped. A quiet moment passed. Then his final words echoed across every listening ship. If this vessel has returned, it means something may have survived. The hologram suddenly ended. Silence spread through the Orion corridor. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the sensor officer aboard the Watcher, 17 suddenly shouted. Commander! New contact detected. Reth turned quickly. What kind of contact? The officer zoomed out the long-range scanner. At first the display showed empty space. But then, something appeared. A massive shadow. Far away in deep space. And it was moving toward the galaxy. For several seconds, no one in the command room of the Watcher, 17 spoke. Every officer stared at the scanner. The shadow on the screen was enormous. It moved slowly through deep space, far beyond the normal travel lanes of the galaxy. The object was still very far away, but the sensors clearly showed that it was massive. Much larger than the ancient human ship. Commander Reth Valen felt a heavy silence fill the room. Enhance the image, he said quietly. The sensor officer adjusted the scanners, trying to get a clearer picture. But the signal was weak and unstable. Commander, the object is too far away. Our scanners can only detect its size. How big? Reth asked. The officer hesitated. Larger than a moon. A cold feeling spread across the command room. Something that large should not be moving through space unnoticed. One of the navigation officers spoke nervously. Could it be a natural object? An asteroid or a drifting planet? The sensor officer shook his head. No. It is changing direction. The shadow was not drifting. It was traveling. And it was heading toward the galaxy. At that moment, the ancient human vessel Aegis Sentinel suddenly powered up again. Bright blue energy lines appeared across its giant hull. Large armored panels slowly opened along its sides. Inside the openings, massive weapons began sliding into position. Long cannons. Energy launchers. Strange structures that no one in the galaxy recognized. One officer gasped. Those weapons are enormous. Commander Reth watched the scene carefully. The human ship had been damaged and silent for 20,000 years. But now it looked like a war machine waking up. Suddenly, another signal spread out from the human vessel. This time the message was not a warning. It was a command signal. The transmission shot across the galaxy at incredible speed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something strange began appearing on the long-range scanners. "Commander," the sensor officer said slowly. "We are detecting multiple power signatures." "Where?" "Everywhere." Reth stepped closer to the screen. Small lights began appearing across the star map. First one. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Each light represented an ancient energy source that had suddenly activated. Hidden satellites began waking up in distant star systems. Old defense platforms powered on near-forgotten asteroid belts. Deep space stations that had been silent for thousands of years suddenly came online. The officers on the Watcher 17 watched in disbelief. The human signal had awakened them all. "Are these human machines?" one officer asked. The computer analyzed the signals. After a few seconds, the answer appeared. Human origin confirmed. Reth slowly understood what was happening. Humanity had not simply vanished 20,000 years ago. They had left something behind. A network. A defense system hidden across the galaxy. Waiting. Waiting for a signal. And the Aegis Sentinel had just activated it. The Orion trade corridor was now filled with quiet tension. Hundreds of alien ships were still watching the ancient vessel from a distance. Some captains were already preparing to leave. Others remained frozen in curiosity. Suddenly, a new message appeared on every communication screen. It came directly from the human ship. A calm artificial voice spoke again. Human Defense Network activated. Primary Guardian vessel operational. Another pause followed. Then the voice continued. Threat detection confirmed. Commander Reth turned quickly toward the sensor station. Confirm the object in deep space. The officer nodded nervously. The shadow is still moving toward us. How fast? Faster than before. The giant human ship slowly turned its massive body toward the distant darkness. Weapons continued sliding into place across its armored hull. Energy built inside the giant cannons. The ancient vessel looked ready for war. One of the officers whispered quietly. They were not building an empire. Reth looked at the screen again. The forgotten ship stood between the galaxy and the approaching shadow. Like a guardian that had finally awakened. The officer finished the thought in a trembling voice. Humans were guarding the galaxy. Outside the Watcher 17's window, the massive human ship moved forward. Slowly. Fearlessly. For 20,000 years, humanity had been silent. Now their defenses were waking up. And somewhere in deep space, their ancient enemy was coming back. The Orion trade corridor had never been so quiet. Hundreds of alien ships floated in silence, watching the massive human vessel slowly move forward. No one tried to approach it anymore. The mood had changed. This was no longer a mystery. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Commander Reth Valen stood near the viewing window of the Watcher 17, staring into the darkness ahead. Far beyond the human ship, the distant shadow continued moving closer. And it was growing larger on the scanners. Distance update, Reth said. The sensor officer answered quickly. Object closing the gap rapidly. Estimated arrival to outer galaxy in 40 hours. The number made the room uneasy. 40 hours. Whatever that thing was, it was coming fast. The ancient human ship Aegis Sentinel seemed to understand the situation perfectly. The vessel moved forward with slow confidence, positioning itself between the approaching threat and the populated regions of the galaxy. Its massive weapons continued charging. Across its armored hull, bright lines of blue energy flowed like rivers of light. Then something incredible appeared on the long-range scanners. "Commander, more ships," the sensor officer whispered. Reth looked up sharply. "From where?" "Multiple locations, deep space, abandoned systems, asteroid belts." Tiny lights began appearing across the star map again. But this time they were moving. Old human warships were waking up. One after another, ancient vessels slowly powered on in hidden places across the galaxy. Some had been buried inside asteroids. Others had been drifting quietly near forgotten stars. Each one was old. Each one was powerful. And every single one was answering the same signal. Human Defense Protocol. The officers aboard the Watcher 17 watched the map fill with moving lights. Dozens. Then hundreds. A quiet voice spoke from the ship's computer. Multiple human Guardian vessels now active. A young officer stared at the screen in disbelief. They were everywhere. Commander Reth finally understood the truth. Humanity had not disappeared. They had prepared. Long ago, when the First War began, humans knew they might not survive forever. So they built something that would outlive them. A silent shield around the galaxy. Thousands of hidden machines. Waiting patiently for the day the enemy returned. And now that day had arrived. Suddenly, the sensors began screaming with new alerts. "Commander," the sensor officer shouted. "The unknown object has entered scanner range." The main screen changed instantly. The distant shadow finally became clear. Gasps filled the command room. It was not a ship. It was a living structure. A massive dark organism floating through space, covered in strange moving shapes. Its surface twisted slowly like living metal. Large openings glowed with deep red energy. Behind it were more shapes. Dozens of them. The enemy fleet. Ancient. Silent. And terrifying. One officer whispered, "How could anything fight that?" Commander Reth looked toward the human vessel ahead of them. The Aegis Sentinel did not retreat. Instead, its engines flared brighter. The giant ship moved forward to face the approaching darkness. At the same time, the other human Guardian ships began appearing across nearby space. One by one they arrived from hidden jump points. Old human destroyers. Ancient defense cruisers. Heavy battle platforms. Each vessel carried the scars of a long-forgotten war. But their weapons still worked. A final transmission suddenly spread across every ship in the region. The calm artificial voice of the human vessel spoke once more. "Attention all civilizations. Human defense fleet now active." The message paused for a moment. Then the AI delivered its final statement. "Stand behind the Guardian line. Humanity will handle the threat." The alien ships quickly began retreating to safer distances. No one argued. No one questioned it. They all understood something important now. Humanity may have vanished. But their mission had never ended. Across the battlefield, the ancient human fleet formed a defensive wall in front of the galaxy. Their weapons powered up. Energy cannons glowed brighter. Missile systems armed themselves. Commander Reth watched in silence as the first human warship fired. A massive beam of blue light exploded across space, striking the front of the approaching enemy. The battle had begun. And for the first time in 20,000 years, humanity was fighting again.